Welcome back, and many thanks for staying with the big story. We are talking about safety in our schools. And Florence, I want to come with you. We have seen more incidents of rape in our schools. And, you know, we all shudder at the thought of how many unreported cases there could be, and even at home, you know, by caregivers. What is the cause of this, and how do we even begin to break this cycle?
Wow, I don't think I have the answer of the cause. I can tell you about what we've not done. I think there's a rape culture in this country, and then there's also the silence that is perpetuated either at home or even at school when such a violation happens. At home, I can tell you that sometimes when we went out and spoke to children and they were telling us about some of the violations, some of them were speaking for the first time. And hence, as Equality Now, we think that if we provided safe spaces for children to speak, would be able to prevent some of these incidents from happening. And when we talk about safe spaces, it means that at least a school is a formal institution. A school is something that the Ministry of Education can be checking and approving some of the people who come in or leave. But also it is a setup that is easy then to monitor, take data, and also check what kind of violations are going on. Mm-hmm. If I can give you an example of a child we spoke to, who spoke for the first time when we spoke to them last year. She's 16. She was raped from when she was 6 up to when she was 9. And she was opening up in school for the first time when she's in Form 3. And she was asking us, does the law allow me now to kill my father? What this tells us is that from when this child was 6, nobody has listened to her. From when at home, at school, there's no mechanism for that to happen. And then there's no psychosocial support for this child, who is constantly living and thinking of how she will kill her father one day. Now, if we do not put mechanisms in place to ensure that we are listening to children, offering them psychosocial support when they need it, directing them to the services they need, we might have a good law. We might have the Sexual Offences Act, but we might not consider that safety for children goes beyond the fence, goes beyond either we have a policeman or not in the school. Safety means having a listening ear. And we have seen from the recent events that the teachers are not having a listening ear. Therefore, a safe space needs to be created in all schools. Have somebody manning who is not a teacher, but somebody from outside who can offer psychosocial support, whom the children can trust with information. That means then we are able to capture violations that happen both at home, on the way to school, and also in school. Mm-hmm. We have seen incidences of duty bearers within schools covering up for the sake of the name of the school and forgetting that the primary person in this place is a child. Now, when we get that, then we'll be able to get to the root cause of some of these things. The other thing I think is also we are not giving our children comprehensive information so that they know what their right is, they know where to go for help, and they also know who do I talk to or who do I run to, whether I'm 12, whether I'm 7, whether I'm 16, whether I'm 17. So long as the law says I am a child, I need to be protected. And some of these things can be done now. The other thing I noticed with the Moi Girls tragedy was the fact that we don't have response mechanisms when sexual and gender-based violence happens. Mm-hmm. Of course, when a fire happens, you know you will have to call the fire brigade and all that. But when sexual offenses happen, how do the schools even know which are the hospitals to go? Do they know how to handle evidence so that then the perpetrator can be brought to book? Do they know how to even talk to these children in such a way that then these children feel protected and therefore know that they can trust that the management will ensure I get the help I need? Mm-hmm. We have the TSC policy of 2010 that talks about teachers as perpetrators. But we need to scale it up and show that if I want to hire a teacher, that I can go online and find out that this teacher is a perpetrator. Mm-hmm. So he's not taken from outside TSC and then lands in a private school. So some of these things are because of gaps that will exist within duty bearers.
Right.
That then means that these issues continue silently over and over again.
Right.
So again, the cause goes back to adults.
Right.
We have not done what we need to do.
Right. And Honorable Milemba, there are some people who've proposed radical, mechanisms and steps to take, even proposing getting rid altogether of boarding schools in the country. Do you think there's a place for that? There's any water to this argument?
A very exciting topic, and before I make a few comments about that one, and more so I'll be making my personal thinking about the boarding schools.
Right.
I would want to first make some comments about what my other colleagues have said. One, on the issue of stepping aside of the principle of Moi Girls, Nairobi. I think that was commendable, though noted very well by my colleague here, Jonathan, that it was belated because maybe he should have stepped aside after the school fire occurred. But I thought that was also brave for her because currently from the Parliament, where I also sit sometimes, we have scandals of NYs, and the guys who are in charge cannot just step aside. There's the May scandal, and the leadership is saying, hey, I'm not just responsible, and everywhere else. So I saw her as a very brave person, and that was very, very good. How I would wish that other leadership in other ministries and other areas could also emulate that. And I also loved what the former principal of Nairobi School did, because he did exactly that when he was accused of bullying in the schools. So I think to that extent, I saw the teachers leading by strong examples. Interjecting a little also on Our Lady who is in the other studio, is the issue of allowing non-teachers to get into the schools because they can be listened to a little bit more. I'm a teacher, 25 years in school. There are so many non-teachers in our schools, and these non-teachers become part and parcel of the community of the school. And if maybe the fear would be that the teachers would protect certain happenings inside the school in order to protect the name of the school, then I would want to caution that even those non-teachers in the school would be part and parcel of the community and will just do exactly the same. In fact, it becomes extremely dangerous when you have non-teachers in schools because they don't know the ethics of staying with the girls and with the boys. But that's a topic for another day. Now, let me go to your question, which for me is very exciting, that what's the future of boarding schools? And this is my personal view. This is my personal view, so I'm not talking on behalf of Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers nor any institution. That the boarding schools finally have no future in Kenya. And let's look at the best practices around the world. There's no correlation between going to school and being in the boarding section. If you look at what even the government is doing currently, the policy is directed towards funding more of tuition and learning and not the boarding per se. The boarding schools came up in Kenya and around Africa after independence when the schooling was introduced by missionaries and later on taken over by the governments because we wanted to harness these girls and boys in schools in order to learn. And it's because the practices within the villages, the culture, did not allow them to learn while they are at home. But where we have moved, and if you look at the best practices around the world, students go to school and go back home. And soon in future, the Kenyans should prepare to have students who go to school and come back home. And therefore, the day schools will be a stronger institution than the boarding institutions.
All right, and I'll allow Mr. Wesaya to just react to what you said, whether he agrees that, the stepping aside, which Honorable Milemba said was honorable for the principal to step aside. Just your reaction to that as you give us your opinion about the place of boarding schools. Many people saying that really it has no place, it's outdated. What do you think about that?
The issue of stepping aside, I think, is a cliche in Kenya. And in Kenya, we usually have seasons for everything. And it is during the tenure of President Moi Kibaki that this stepping aside business, became, a hit. When people engage in graft, then they step aside. Then, the case fizzles out. So I'm hoping that with the many people stepping aside and making Honorable Milemba happy, he's not going to sanitize them in Parliament when they get to his committee. But to move on to, you know, the future and the necessity of having boarding schools in Kenya, I think time is now for Kenyans to have a conversation. The only place that I would bet that we continue having boarding schools seriously would be in the arid and semi-arid areas where distances are vast, the population is sparse, and then to make business sense, you will need to collect all the learners into an institution, protect it, let them board. But we are not going to change, you know, at once and move from purely over 70% boarding and go back to day school. It is national dialogue that we need to have. We need communities to embrace and invest in the schools that they host within their communities and know that the community experiences shape initial learning. So as individuals and as parents, as guardians, on our dinner tables, we need to start having candid discussions with our children. That your life does not begin and end with you getting into a national school. Your life does not begin and end with you getting into a boarding school. I went into boarding school myself when I was going to secondary school, but I was in primary school for 8 years. I loved the experience, and that is what shaped me. So as parents, we need to learn to stay with our children a little bit longer, mold them until they are able to stand up for themselves. What is happening in Kenya, we are beginning to take children out to boarding school when they are still too young. We disconnect with them, and then we are not able to stay with them under the same roof. That is where the rain started beating us. Our children in school are too young. They do not know what safety and their security means. We need to empower them. But as Milemba talks about reducing the number of non-teachers getting into schools, we also need to appreciate the type of load the regular teacher in a school has. A teacher who is a subject matter expert, let's say you are teaching English. English would be the first lesson any day on the timetable, and it will be the last any day. You are a class teacher to add on to that. Maybe you are a games teacher. Then you are in charge of guiding or career counseling. It is not possible. That is why my sister Machio is talking about having other people who are not teachers. But let us not reduce that definition to mean somebody who is not trained to be a teacher. You can be a trained teacher in the school, but not offering, you know, classroom instruction.
Very well.
You are somebody who manages the safe spaces. You are the to-go-to person in the school. You have extra expertise that the learners can draw from, and also your other peers within the school.
Right.
Very well.
Right. And Florence, even as I get your closing remarks, because we are soon running out of time for the show, one of the biggest challenges in seeking justice for rape victims has been prosecuting the cases, especially even where, you know, the perpetrators are known. How can this gap be sealed, even as we get your closing remarks on the subject?
Okay, I'll have to go back and comment about the issue of the non-teaching staff. And what I meant was people who are professionals in psychology. And if that means it's a teacher, that's fine, but has to be that it's a person who is exclusively doing their work, but with the professional mind of a psychologist. And this person will not just come from anywhere. This person will be seconded there by Ministry of Education. And in the issue of boarding school, I also believe that it is a secondary, I mean, it is the security issue is not about boarding or boarding or day school. The issue of safety, where sexual gender-based violence is concerned, is not because it is boarding, therefore there are many occurrences. Remember, children are also violated at home by their fathers, by their uncles, by their cousins, and therefore it is not a matter of if you don't put them in boarding schools, they won't be violated. Right. Hence, the safe spaces become important. And please just remind me the last question that you asked me, even as I do my closing remarks.
Actually, I think that's fine, because I'm told we're out of time. We wanted to talk about the prosecuting these cases, but we'll have to have that conversation another day because we are out of time. But so much more needs to be talked about, so many things to be considered regarding this very crucial matter. I want to thank you, Florence Machio, who's from Equality Now, and Jonathan Wasaya, who's an education expert, as well as Honorable Ombiko Milema, who is from Kupet and also Honorable Member of Parliament. Thank you very much for joining us to have this conversation tonight. And that's where we wind up the big story. Many